Hello there, lovely folks of YouTube. Ren here. So this is the time of year when a lot of people are thinking of starting their gardens, either whether they're starting from scratch or they're looking to just start fresh for the new year, or just, wanting to get out there and get in their gardens. Things are warming up depending on where you're at, of course. Here in Virginia, it's actually rather nice out, which is why I'm sitting outside. It was in the 60s today, which is pretty impressive for February. A little drizzly, which is why I'm under the eave of my house right now, but I just had to be outside. But a lot of people are thinking, okay, I have all these ideas of what I want to do, what plants I want to get, where I want to put them. When do I actually start this? And unfortunately, the answer is I don't have a good straightforward answer. It depends. But we're going to talk about what those factors are that it depends on. So the number one factor to start off with that everything else is going to be based on, you need to find out what your frost dates are. That's going to vary widely depending on where you are. They're pretty easy to find online. If you just do a Google search, put in like your location frost dates, and you'll get a lot of hits that will come up that way. This is the little thing I printed out for mine, which is here in Henrico County in Virginia. This is actually from the Dave's Garden website, which is a website that I highly recommend. I know I've mentioned it in previous videos. It looks archaic, mainly because the users tend to be a bit older, but older in this case means more experienced, because I will take an old gardener over a young gardener any day as far as their experience goes. So, my frost dates here. Frost dates are actually given as a statistical range. So it's not just like a set date. It's saying, okay, so you're looking at a temperature here. So in the spring, whether your temperature is 24 degrees, which is a hard freeze, 28 degrees, which is a freeze, or 32 degrees, which is a frost. And then what the statistical percentage of you getting a day that is 32 degrees would be on a particular day. So for example, if I wanted to plant out something that cannot tolerate a frost at all, not even slightly, it gives me, on April 21st, there's a 10% chance of it being 32 degrees or lower. So I want to plant after April 21st for that. If I have plants that can tolerate some frost but not a hard freeze, then I would probably be looking at like around March 27th, according to this chart, because that would be about a 50% chance of it being 28 degrees, but only a 10% chance of it being 24 degrees. So that's the first bit of knowledge that you need to put in your back pocket. What are my frost dates for my given area? A lot of that also is just picking your poison, because sometimes you can fudge it a little bit if you're willing to be a little more vigilant. Like, you can put out your plants earlier, but that means that if the temperature takes a sudden unexpected dip, if you hit on that bad side of the percentage, you're going to have to go out and find some way to protect that plant, whether it be like a floating row cover, or the little cloche domes if you have those, or even just the, super jerry-rigged of just like cut the bottom off of a milk jug and use that to cover it over. Some way to protect the plant if you happen to, if you're planting on the more dangerous side of that line. So just keep that in mind as well. Now, of course, the plant itself is going to have a lot to do with that as well. I know I mentioned that some plants just cannot stand frost at all. Some plants are a little bit more frost-proof. Generally, if it's something that grows perennially, it's going to be a little more frost tolerant. So that's a good rule of thumb to keep, because obviously something that grows year round and comes back year after year is generally going to be a little bit better to stand an unexpected frost, because that's part of their genetic makeup, is being able to, they're in it for the long haul. If you're looking at like vegetable or fruit crops, you're going to be looking at like, there are cold weather crops and warm weather crops. So your cold weather crops, things like your peas, your beets, your lettuce, your carrots, those are things that can stand a frost, and those are the things that usually can be put out earlier, whereas the hot weather crops, your tomatoes, your peppers, your zucchini, those corn, those things cannot stand a frost at all. So keep that in mind as well when you're doing your planting and just setting your planning ahead for what frost date you're looking at. Now, of course, you also have to take into consideration, are you going to start this from seed? And are you going to start it indoors or sow it directly outside? So usually this is where you're going to look on your seed packet itself. Each individual plant will have a range of time that it usually takes to get established from seed, usually anywhere between 2 and 6 weeks. So if you're going to start it indoors from seed to get that head start, you're going to want to plant your seed indoors about however many weeks it takes for it to get established before you set it outside. Some plants do not tolerate being transplanted and need only to be sown directly in the location in which they're going to grow. In particular, things like the root crops like beets, carrots, even mandrakes, they don't like to be moved around and manhandled. Those roots are pretty delicate and they just don't like being dug up and moved. So those are plants that you're going to want to sow directly outdoors. And this is something that, again, if you purchase it from seed, it will usually give you a time frame saying if you're seeding it indoors, you want to start this many days before the frost date. If you're sowing it outdoors, you want to sow it this many days before or after the frost date. Or it'll just tell you outright, you know, don't sow this outdoors, or don't plant this in pots inside. So, let's see. So once you have the physical logistics out of the way of like what your frost date is and when your plant likes to be planted according to that frost date, that's where we start looking at the astrological correspondences. Now, I have made a video on gardening by the moon phases, which I will link somewhere, wherever it goes up here. And this is a system that's been used for like a long ass time. Most of the farmers' almanacs are using this system similar to this. There's a newer system called biodynamic farming, which incorporates a lot more data into it, but it's all based on the Zodiac system. However, one thing I want to mention of note is that there are 2 different Zodiac systems that you can use. You can use the tropical Zodiac or the sidereal Zodiac. The tropical Zodiac is where we determine that Aries begins at 0 degrees on the day of and minute of the spring equinox. Okay? The sidereal Zodiac takes the actual locations of where the constellations are. So that one actually takes into account the precession of the equinoxes and how the constellations are not in the same position because the Earth has shifted from the time that we first established this astrological system. Most gardening, like apps that use moon gardening, are going to use the sidereal Zodiac. I prefer to use the tropical Zodiac just because that's the system of Zodiac that I use for my magical endeavors, and therefore I'm going to use the same system for my gardening endeavors because those 2 things are intertwined. So keep that in mind. You're going to have to pick and choose. And there's no wrong answer there. Whichever one you feel works better for your personal situation. If you like using the app and that's way more convenient for you, by all means go for it. There were several apps out there that I looked through. They all use the sidereal system, which is why I don't use them myself. I just calculate things out by hand, or I just look at a lunar calendar that's using the tropical system instead. But anyway, that was a long diatribe about the Zodiac, and I apologize. But it's also kind of a necessary diatribe because it gives context for what I'm about to say. So when you're looking at lunar gardening, like I said, I mentioned this in the other video, but I'm going to go over some of the basics here. The best times for planting are going to be anytime the moon is waxing. So from the day after the new moon all the way up to the full moon is the best time to plant, with the exception of root crops or anything that you want to grow a stronger root system, which would include some of your perennials that you want to get established in the first year. It's okay to plant those from the day after the full moon until the half moon when it's waning. Don't do any planting between the half moon and the new moon, because that's just a bad time for plants in general, or at least for being moved and planted in new situations. It's okay to do weeding and cultivating and tending your compost and pruning and things like that in those times. Just don't plant any new plants. So that gives you basically a 2-week period where the moon is waxing, and then an additional week to work on root crops and the things when the moon is waning. 3 weeks out of 4, that's not bad. You also want to take into account, of course, the zodiac signs that the moon is actually present in during that time. And the moon moves through each zodiac sign in a succession of about 2.5 days, give or take. The best zodiac signs are when the moon is in a water sign for the garden. The second best is when it's in an earth sign. Air signs are iffy. There's a couple air signs that are like situational. Like Gemini is good for beans because beans tend to be in a pod together like twins. And then Libra is good for flowers because Libra is all about aesthetics. And I say this with love as a fellow Libra myself. Love aesthetics. But air signs, like I said, very situational. Fire signs, just no. Fire signs, they say you can plant onions and garlic during fire sign because they have that Mars affiliation, but I would just avoid fire signs altogether. Fire signs are great for weeding, pest control, other stuff. So, that being said, when you're putting all those things together, your frost state, what your plants are doing, your astrological sign, that means that for me personally, where I'm at and what I'm planning on doing, I have a waxing moon in Cancer on the tropical zodiac around March 11th to 13th. During that time, I plan on seeding some of my more frost-sensitive plants, like my tomatoes and peppers, indoors. I also plan on taking some of the perennials that I've already started from seed a couple weeks ago and moving them outdoors into a sheltered area. Whether that may be my cold frame or a garden location, just depends on what the weather is looking like and what the plants are looking like, how well developed they are at that point. So that's my first big spurt of planting in the garden. I have another one that's going to happen in April. Hang on, I have it written down. April 7th, 8th, going into the 9th is when the waxing moon is going to be in Cancer in April in my location. Again, by the tropical zodiac. So that's going to be my big push to get some of my more frost intolerant plants out, because at that point my chance of having a frost I think is only about 20%. Let's see, I have it written down. Oh, it's a 40% chance of dropping below 32. So, but like less than 20% for the other temperatures. So that's not bad. That means that I might have to keep an eye out, and if I do get a frost, I may have to run out and protect those plants for that night. But, you know, I only have about a 40% chance of doing that for about the first week. And then a week after that, they should be pretty good to go. So that's basically how I would plan out my garden. That gives me a lot of time in between. And the nice thing too is that both of those days are weekends. So I'm going to have those weekends basically to be doing planting. The rest of my time is just going to be doing preparatory work. I've been working on turning my compost because we're in Virgo right now, which is an earth sign, and it's good for that. Just preparing my beds, cultivating and tilling the beds, pulling up any winter weeds. I've been throwing out some seed from some of the cover crop that I had left just for shits and giggles. You know, just mundane task work. This coming weekend I'm going to prune my apple tree because it'll be in Capricorn at that point, and waning moon, which is a good time for pruning. So yeah, these are all things that you can take into account when you're planning out your garden. But definitely for that big push of when do I actually put the plants in the ground, look at your frost dates, look at what the plant wants, and then as a third consideration, look at your astrological calendar. And if you don't get time off, like if that moon in Cancer is on a day that you're scheduled to work a 12-hour shift all 3 days, you know what? It'll be fine. It'll be fine. It may not be optimal, but it will still work. You can find a way to make it work. So, but anyway, that's what I do. That's my recommendations for you. So, you have some homework. Yep, your homework is, of course, to do your comparison, find out when your frost dates are. Find out what plants you want to plant and how frost tolerant they are. Figure out what days would be best for you to put them out, and then compare that to a lunar calendar and figure out, and as well as your own personal calendar of when your free time is, and just figure out an optimal day to plant those plants out there. So there you go. Hope this video is informative and enlightening. I hope it finds you well, and I will see you again soon. Hey, one more thing. I almost forgot. I printed this out. I'm going to give you a link. This is a calendar. It's from astroseek.com. They have a gardening moon calendar that you can actually switch back and forth between sidereal and zodiac, as well as putting in your local time zone to give you more accurate times. So that link will be below. Awesome. Ah, I can't believe I forgot that. Have a good day.